held my breath as Marissa pinned the last alteration on my wedding dress. The boutique's soft lighting caught every crystal and pearl, transforming me into something ethereal, something worthy. "You look stunning, Zara," she said, stepping back to admire her work. I twisted slightly, watching the fabric catch the light. 6 months of planning, of dreaming, of believing I was finally getting everything right. The dress was perfect, sweetheart neckline, delicate lace sleeves, a train that would make my mother cry. I felt beautiful in a way I rarely allowed myself to feel. My phone buzzed on the cushioned bench beside me. Esme's name flashed across the screen. My best friend since we were awkward 13-year-olds with braces and big dreams. The person who'd held my hand through my parents' divorce, who'd helped me pick out this very boutique. "It's Esme," I told Marissa. "Mind if I take this?" She waved me on while gathering pins. "Go ahead. I need to grab more tulle anyway." I swiped to answer, careful not to move too much in the half-pinned gown. "Hey, you won't believe how amazing this dress looks now." Silence. "Esme, you there?" "Zara." Her voice sounded strange, tight. "I need to tell you something." The air in the boutique suddenly felt too thin. I knew that tone, the one she used when delivering bad news. "What's wrong?" I just got off the phone with Rosewood Gardens. There's been a mix-up with your venue." My stomach tightened. "What kind of mix-up?" "They double-booked your date. May 15th. I closed my eyes, trying to stay calm. "Okay, we can fix this. Did they offer an alternative date?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Esme?" "The thing is, they didn't exactly double-book it. Someone specifically requested your date and venue after you booked it." I frowned, confusion replacing my initial panic. "That doesn't make sense. We signed contracts. They can't just—" "It was me, Zara." The words hung between us. I must have misheard. "What?" "I booked Rosewood Gardens. For my wedding, on May 15th. I laughed, the sound hollow and wrong in the quiet boutique. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking. Archer proposed last month. We're getting married in May." The room tilted sideways. I gripped the nearest chair, suddenly aware of how exposed I felt in the half-pinned dress. "But that's my venue. My date. You helped me choose it." "I know, I'm sorry. But when Archer and I started planning, it just seemed perfect. You understand, right? You always understand." I didn't understand. Not at all. My best friend had stolen my wedding venue and date, and was calling to— "What? Get my blessing?" "Why would you do this?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. "The venue had a cancellation policy in the contract. They called you 3 times, but you didn't answer. Because I'd been busy with deadlines at the architecture firm. Because I'd trusted that everything was handled. Because I'd trusted her." "So you just took it?" "Archer's family is flying in from overseas. We needed something definite. And you and Benjamin can still get married this year. Just pick another venue." Just pick another venue. As if 6 months of planning could be erased with a simple venue change. As if my dream wedding was interchangeable with any other option. "I have to go," I managed, ending the call before she could respond. I stood frozen in the beautiful dress that now felt like a costume. Marissa returned, arms full of fabric, her smile fading when she saw my face. "Zara, what happened?" "I need to get out of this dress." "But we're not finished with—" "Please." The word came out ragged. 20 minutes later, I sat across from Benjamin at Luciana's, our favorite restaurant. His dark eyes widened as I recounted the conversation with Esme. "That's insane," he said, reaching for my hand. "She can't do that." "She already did." I stared at our intertwined fingers, noticing how his thumb moved in soothing circles against my skin. The venue confirmed it. They had a 48-hour response policy for scheduling conflicts that I apparently missed. "We'll find another venue, a better one." "That's not the point, Ben." I pulled my hand away. "My best friend stole our wedding. Doesn't that bother you?" He shrugged, taking a sip of his water. Of course it bothers me. But what can we do? His casual acceptance felt wrong, like he wasn't as invested as I was, like this was just an inconvenience rather than a betrayal. I'm going to confront her, I decided aloud. Don't make this bigger than it needs to be, babe. It's just a venue. Just a venue. Just like Esme had said. The waiter arrived with our meals, but my appetite had vanished. I pushed pasta around my plate while Benjamin ate, occasionally offering platitudes that felt increasingly hollow. When I got home that night, a cream-colored envelope waited in my mailbox. Expensive paper, gold embossing. I knew what it was before I opened it. You are cordially invited to celebrate the wedding of Esme Warner and Archer Howard. Saturday, May 15th, Rosewood Gardens. A handwritten note was tucked inside. I hope you'll be my maid of honor. No one understands me like you do. Love always, Esme. The invitation trembled in my hands, not from sadness, not anymore, from rage. The invitation sat on my coffee table for 3 days. I'd walk past it, feel the rage bubble up, then force myself to breathe. I'd known Esme for 15 years. There had to be an explanation beyond the obvious, that my best friend was a backstabbing, venue-stealing snake. Rain pelted my apartment windows as I curled on the couch with a glass of wine, scrolling through photos on my phone. Esme and me at college graduation. Esme helping me move into my first apartment. Esme meeting Benjamin for the first time, giving me a thumbs up behind his back. I paused on a photo from 2 years ago. Us on a weekend trip to the coast, arms wrapped around each other, laughing into the camera. Had she been fake even then? Had our entire friendship been a performance? Lightning flashed, illuminating the wedding invitation. I picked it up, running my finger over the embossed lettering. Esme knew exactly what she was doing. She'd helped me create my wedding Pinterest board, for God's sake. She'd stood in Rosewood Gardens with me, agreeing it was perfect, watching me cry when I put down the deposit. My phone buzzed with a text from Benjamin. Working late again, don't wait up. 3rd time this week. I tossed the phone aside, irritation mixing with my already simmering anger. He should be here, plotting revenge with me, not acting like this was some minor inconvenience. I grabbed my laptop and opened our wedding planning spreadsheet. Maybe Benjamin was right. Maybe we could find another venue. I scrolled through local options, but each one felt wrong. Too small, too expensive, too... not what I wanted. My finger hovered over the delete button. What was the point? The perfect venue was gone. The perfect date was gone. My perfect friend was gone. A notification popped up on my screen. An email from Benjamin, probably apologizing for working late again. I clicked it open, then froze. It wasn't addressed to me. Esme, can't stop thinking about last night. Same time Thursday. B. I stared at the screen, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. This had to be a mistake. Benjamin must have sent this to me by accident, and it was about something innocent. Wedding planning, maybe. Or a surprise they were organizing for me. But why would they meet at night? Without me? I scrolled down to see the earlier messages in the thread. My hands shook as I read exchange after exchange, going back weeks. You're incredible. I can't believe we waited so long to do this. No one needs to know. It's our secret. I want you so badly right now. The room spun around me. I barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up, wine burning my throat on the way back up. I slid to the floor, pressing my forehead against the cool tile. Not just my venue, not just my wedding date, my fiancé. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I finally stood, my legs were numb and my mind was clear. This wasn't just betrayal. This was systematic destruction of everything I cared about, orchestrated by the person I trusted most. I washed my face and returned to my laptop. The emails weren't enough. I needed more evidence before confronting either of them. I needed to be smart about this. I picked up my phone and called the one person who would understand. Patrick, it's me. I need your help. My brother arrived 40 minutes later, soaked from the rain but arms open for the hug I desperately needed. I showed him the emails, watching his expression shift from confusion to disbelief to the same cold anger I felt. "That motherfucker," he said finally. "I never liked him." "You introduced us," I reminded him. "Worst mistake of my life." He paced my living room. "What are you going to do?" I sank onto the couch. "I don't know. Confront them, break up with him, burn her wedding dress. All solid options." Patrick sat beside me. "But first, we need to be absolutely sure. The emails could be misleading. We need concrete proof before you blow up your entire life." He was right. As much as I wanted to scream at both of them right now, I needed to be certain, and I needed to be strategic. "So what do I do?" I asked. Patrick squeezed my shoulder. "You get proof, and then you make them regret ever crossing Zara Martinez." For the first time since seeing the emails, I felt something other than devastation, a flicker of determination, of purpose. "I need to see his phone," I said, "and I need to get into Esme's social media." Patrick nodded. "I can help with the tech stuff, but Zar, are you sure you want to go down this road? Once you start digging, they're getting married on my wedding day. In my wedding venue," I said, my voice hardening. "And they're fucking behind my back. I'm already on this road." Thunder crashed outside, as if nature itself was validating my rage. I picked up the wedding invitation and tore it in half, then quarters, then confetti. "I'm going to destroy them," I said quietly. "Both of them, and I'm going to make sure they never see it coming." Patrick's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded. "Then we better get started." I pulled out a notebook and began to write, the storm raging outside matching the one building within me. By morning, I had a plan. By the time Benjamin texted that he was stuck at the office again, I had a purpose. The rain had stopped, but the storm was just beginning. Benjamin came home the next morning with coffee and croissants. His hair still damp from a shower I knew he hadn't taken at our apartment. I accepted the peace offering with a smile that felt like broken glass on my face. "I missed you last night," I said, taking a careful sip of the latte. "Big project." "Huge." He kissed my forehead. "The Seattle client is being impossible. I didn't leave the office until 2 a.m. The lie slid so easily from his lips. Had it always been this way? Had I just never noticed? "Poor baby." I touched his cheek, searching his eyes for any hint of guilt. "Nothing. You should get some sleep." "Actually, I need to head back in a few hours." He yawned, stretching. "Just came home to shower and change." "Perfect." "I'll be at Delilah's office all day," I said. "The Richardson project is in its final phase." This, at least, wasn't a lie. My boss had been understanding about my need for a flexible schedule this week. What she didn't know was that I'd be using part of that flexibility to execute phase 1 of my plan. Benjamin disappeared into the bedroom while I pretended to read emails. 20 minutes later, he emerged freshly dressed, his phone in hand. "I'm going to crash for a bit," he announced, placing his phone on the coffee table. "Wake me at noon?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. As soon as the bedroom door closed, I counted to 60, then carefully picked up his phone. The screen was locked, but I knew his password, his mother's birthday. So predictable. My heart hammered as I opened his messages. There it was, a conversation with Esme, right at the top. I took screenshots of everything, sending them to my own phone, my hands trembling with each swipe. "Working late again. Z doesn't suspect anything. Can't wait to see you. A says he's going to his parents this weekend. My place. God, last night was incredible. Still can't believe we're doing this." Each message was a knife twisting deeper. I scrolled back weeks, months, documenting everything. They'd been sleeping together since January. 4 months of betrayal while I planned our wedding. I heard Benjamin stir in the bedroom and quickly locked his phone, placing it exactly where he'd left it. By the time he shuffled out for water, I was calmly drinking coffee, a magazine open on my lap. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing my flushed face. Just excited about the Richardson project, I lied. Go back to sleep. After he left for work that afternoon, I met Patrick at a coffee shop 3 neighborhoods away from mine. I couldn't risk running into anyone I knew. Got it all, I said, sliding my phone across the table. Every disgusting message. Patrick scrolled through the screenshots, his jaw tightening. Jesus, Zara, this is... I know. My voice cracked. I'd been holding it together all day, but now the reality crashed over me. They've been laughing at me for months. Patrick reached across the table and squeezed my hand. What's your next move? Confront them. End it. Move on. The words felt hollow even as I said them. Is that what you really want? I stared into my untouched coffee. No, I want them to feel what I'm feeling. I want them to lose everything, just like I have. That's my girl. Patrick's smile was grim. So, what's the real plan? I need to talk to Esme. Get her to admit it to my face. Are you sure that's smart? She'll just lie. I need to see it, I insisted. I need to look in her eyes when she lies to me. Patrick didn't argue. He knew me well enough to recognize when my mind was made up. I texted Esme that evening. Need wedding advice, lunch tomorrow? Her response came immediately. Always. Marcello's at 1. The restaurant where she'd first introduced me to Benjamin. Of course. I barely slept that night, rehearsing what I would say, how I would remain calm. By morning, I felt hollowed out but determined. Esme was already at Marcello's when I arrived, waving enthusiastically from our usual table. She looked radiant, glowing skin, perfect hair, designer dress. Was this what betrayal did for a person? Zara? She stood to hug me. I let her, my arms hanging limply at my sides. God, I've missed you. Wedding planning is eating all my time. I slid into my seat. That's actually what I wanted to talk about. I know. You're still upset about the venue. She reached for my hand. I pulled away. But I promise I'll help you find somewhere even better. It's not about the venue. She tilted her head, confusion crossing her features. Then what? Benjamin. Her smile faltered for just a second before returning, brighter than before. What about him? Are you sleeping with him? The question hung between us. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. What? Zara, that's insane. Why would you even ask that? Just answer the question. No, of course not. She laughed, but it sounded forced. He's your fiancé. I'm engaged to Archer. What's gotten into you? I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. Screen up, displaying their messages. Try again. The color drained from her face. She glanced at the phone, then back at me, calculation replacing shock. Those are out of context, she said carefully. We were discussing wedding plans. Surprises for you. At 2 a.m., in his bed. My voice remained steady, though my insides felt like they were being shredded. Zara, please, you're my best friend. I would never. Stop lying. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I know everything. She stared at me, and for a moment, I thought she might confess. Instead, her eyes filled with tears. It's not what you think, she whispered. We never meant to hurt you. Before I could respond, a familiar voice called out, Ladies, what a coincidence. I turned to see Tiffany, a woman from our wider social circle, approaching our table. Her timing couldn't have been worse. Mind if I join? She asked, already pulling out a chair. Esme shot me a look, part relief, part warning. The conversation was over, for now. As Tiffany chatted about mutual friends, I watched Esme discreetly text under the table, her fingers flying. Warning Benjamin, no doubt. I'd failed to get her full confession, but I'd seen enough in her eyes to know the truth. And as Tiffany prattled on about her new job, she unknowingly dropped the piece of information that would change everything. Oh, by the way, she said, lowering her voice, is it true Benjamin's been spending time at the Westbrook Hotel? My cousin works there and swears she's seen him multiple times with some woman. I figured it had to be work-related, but... Esme's face went rigid. I smiled for the first time in days. How interesting, I said. Tell me more about that. Tiffany's information about the Westbrook Hotel changed everything. After lunch, I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel as I processed what I'd learned. Not only were Benjamin and Esme betraying me, they were doing it somewhere public, somewhere they could be seen, somewhere with security cameras and staff who might remember them. I called Patrick immediately. I need you to meet me tonight. I'm going to the Westbrook. Zara, that's crazy. What are you going to do, stake out the lobby? If I have to. His sigh crackled through the speaker. Fine, but I'm coming with you. We'll be less conspicuous as a couple. I spent the afternoon in a fog at work, nodding through meetings while my mind raced with possibilities. Delilah, my boss, caught me staring blankly at blueprints for the third time that day. Earth to Zara. She waved a hand in front of my face. You've been 1,000,000 miles away all week. What's going on? I considered brushing her off with some excuse about wedding stress, but something in her concerned expression broke through my defenses. My fiancé is cheating on me with my best friend. The words hung in the air between us. Saying it out loud made it real, in a way screenshots and suspicions hadn't. Delilah closed the office door and sat across from me. Are you sure? I nodded, tears threatening despite my determination to stay composed. I have proof, lots of it. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. I wiped at my eyes, but I'm not just going to walk away. Delilah studied me for a long moment. Be careful, Zara. Revenge might feel good in the moment, but it can consume you. I'm not looking for revenge, I lied. Just justice. She didn't look convinced, but she squeezed my shoulder supportively. Take tomorrow off if you need it. The Richardson project can wait. I thanked her and returned to pretending to work, but her warning lingered. Was I going too far? Should I just confront Benjamin, end things cleanly and move on with my life? The thought evaporated when my phone buzzed with a text from him. Working late again. Don't wait up. Patrick picked me up at 9. The Westbrook Hotel was downtown, a sleek high-rise, catering to business travelers and wealthy tourists. We sat in the lobby bar, nursing overpriced cocktails while I scanned every person who entered. This is pointless, Patrick said after an hour. We don't even know if they're meeting tonight. They're meeting. I couldn't explain my certainty, but I felt it in my gut. At 10:30, my patience was rewarded. Benjamin walked through the revolving doors, checking his watch. He didn't head to the elevators or the front desk. Instead, he made straight for the bar, on the opposite side from where we sat. Patrick gripped my arm. Don't do anything stupid. I won't. I slid lower in my seat, watching as Benjamin ordered a drink and checked his phone repeatedly. 20 minutes later, Esme appeared. She wore a trench coat despite the mild evening, her hair pulled back in a low ponytail. Nothing like her usual polished appearance. Clearly an attempt at disguise. Benjamin's face lit up when he saw her. He kissed her in a way he hadn't kissed me in months. Hungry, passionate, public. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to watch as they talked intimately, his hand on her thigh, her fingers playing with his tie. I've seen enough, I whispered to Patrick. Let's go. Outside, I gulped the night air, trying to steady myself. You okay? Patrick asked. No. I leaned against the building, but I will be. We walked to his car in silence. I knew what I needed to do next, but I wasn't sure if Patrick would approve. I need to talk to Tiffany again, I said as he drove. Her cousin who works here. She might be able to help me. Help you how? Information, access, anything that might give me leverage. Patrick frowned. Zara, I get that you're hurt, but this is starting to sound like stalking. It's not stalking to gather evidence about my own fiancé's affair. And what will you do with this evidence? Post it online? Send it to their bosses? Their families? I hadn't thought that far ahead. I don't know yet. That's what worries me. He pulled up outside my apartment. Just sleep on it, okay? Don't do anything tonight. I promised I wouldn't, but as soon as I was inside, I texted Tiffany. Need to talk about what you mentioned at lunch. Urgent. Her response came quickly. Come over now. I have more than you think. 30 minutes later, I sat in Tiffany's cluttered living room while she pulled out her laptop. I didn't want to say too much in front of Esme, she explained, typing rapidly. But my cousin doesn't just work at the Westbrook. She's their events coordinator. She has access to the booking system. And Benjamin has booked the Orchid Suite every Thursday night for the past 3 months. She turned the screen toward me, under his company's name, but with his personal credit card. I stared at the records, each reservation a fresh betrayal. Why are you helping me? We're not even close. Tiffany's expression hardened. Because I've had a crush on Benjamin since college. He knew it too, but he always said he only had eyes for you. She laughed bitterly. Turns out that was a lie. So this is your revenge? This is me doing what I wish someone had done for me when my ex was cheating. She closed the laptop. But there's more. More? My cousin overheard them arguing last week. Something about money missing from a joint account. Esme was accusing Benjamin of taking it. I frowned. Benjamin and I don't have a joint account. Exactly. Tiffany's eyes gleamed. So whose account were they talking about? The implications hit me like a physical blow. Not only were they sleeping together, they were financially entangled somehow. This wasn't just an affair. This was a full-blown relationship happening parallel to mine. There's one more thing, Tiffany said, lowering her voice. My cousin can get you a key card to the Orchid Suite. For next Thursday. My heart raced. Why would she risk her job for me? Because Benjamin hit on her too, before he settled on Esme. Tiffany shrugged. Apparently your fiancé gets around. I should have felt more shock, more pain at this revelation. Instead, I felt a cold clarity settling over me. This wasn't just about Esme's betrayal anymore. This was about Benjamin's pattern of deception that extended far beyond what I'd imagined. Get me that key card, I said. As I left Tiffany's apartment, my phone buzzed with a text from Benjamin. Miss you. Can't wait to come home to you tomorrow. I stared at the message, at the casual lie delivered with such ease. Then I typed back, Miss you too. Sweet dreams. The plan forming in my mind was no longer just about exposing their affair. It was about understanding the full scope of their deception and making sure they both paid for every lie they'd told. The week crawled by as I waited for Thursday. I played the dutiful fiancé, smiling at Benjamin's lies about late meetings and pretending I didn't notice when he came home smelling of unfamiliar perfume. Each deception fueled my resolve. I'd expected to feel guilty about my plan. Instead, I felt nothing but a cold, focused determination that scared me a little. Was this who I was becoming? Someone who schemed and plotted revenge? Wednesday night, I sat alone in our apartment, staring at the engagement ring on my finger. The diamond caught the light, sending prisms across the wall. Once, it had represented everything I wanted. Now it felt like a shackle. My phone rang. Delilah. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. I'm outside your building, she said without preamble. Let me up. 5 minutes later, she was at my door with a bottle of wine and a concerned expression. You haven't been yourself, she said, brushing past me into the apartment. I'm worried. I'm fine. The lie came automatically. Delilah set the wine on the counter and turned to face me. No, you're not. You're plotting something. I recognize that look. What look? The same one you get when a client tries to change the design at the last minute. She uncorked the wine. Determined, but dangerous, I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. What would you do if your fiancé and best friend betrayed you? Leave. Start over. She handed me a glass. But that's not what you're planning, is it? I need to know everything first. I took a long sip. The extent of their betrayal, how long it's been happening, if there's more I don't know. And then I decide what they deserve. Delilah studied me over her glass. Zara, I've known you for 5 years. You're brilliant, driven, and usually kind. This path you're on, it's changing you. They changed me, I snapped. I didn't ask for this. No, but you're choosing how to respond. She set down her glass. Just make sure whatever you do is something you can live with afterward. Her words followed me into uneasy dreams that night. I woke Thursday morning with a knot in my stomach that tightened as the day progressed. By evening, when I met Tiffany outside the Westbrook Hotel, my hands were shaking. You sure about this? She asked, passing me the keycard. No. Yes. Room 1412. They always meet at 9. She squeezed my arm. Be careful. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. This was it. No turning back. The Orchid Suite was on the 14th floor, at the end of a hushed corridor. I used the keycard, slipping inside a room larger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city skyline. A king-sized bed dominated one wall, immaculately made with crisp white linens. The thought of Benjamin and Esme on that bed made me physically ill. I checked my watch. 8:30. 30 minutes to prepare. I considered hiding in the closet or bathroom, but that felt too cliché, too desperate. Instead, I settled into an armchair, facing the door, and waited. At precisely 9:05, the door opened. Benjamin entered first, already loosening his tie. Esme followed, laughing at something he'd said. Neither noticed me until the door clicked shut behind them. Zara! Benjamin froze, his face draining of color. What? How? Hello, Benjamin. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Too calm. Esme? Esme recovered first. This isn't what it looks like. Really? Because it looks like my fiancé and best friend meeting in a hotel room they've been booking every Thursday for months. Benjamin stepped forward, hands raised placatingly. Zara, please, let me explain. Explain what? The affair? The lies? Or the money you've been moving from Esme's account? That hit a nerve. They exchanged quick, panicked glances. You don't understand, Esme said, her voice quavering. It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it for me. I leaned forward. Tell me everything, right now, or I walk out of here and go straight to Archer. The threat of her fiancé learning the truth worked. Esme sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly looking small and afraid. It started at New Year's, she whispered. You were sick, remember? You couldn't make the party. I remembered. Stomach flu had kept me home, while Benjamin went to celebrate with friends. Benjamin was upset about your promotion, she continued. Said you were focusing too much on work, not enough on him. We got drunk and you decided to comfort him by sleeping with him. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. It was supposed to be one time, Benjamin interjected. A mistake. But then you fell in love? I couldn't keep the mockery from my tone. No. Esme looked genuinely horrified. God, no. It was never about love. Then what was it about? They exchanged another look, and suddenly I understood. Money, I said flatly. This is about money. Benjamin's silence was confirmation enough. Archer's family is wealthy, I continued, pieces falling into place. And you needed cash, didn't you, Benjamin? For those gambling debts you thought I didn't know about. His head snapped up. How did you? I'm not stupid. I've seen the credit card statements. I turned to Esme. So, what's your angle? Why risk everything with Archer? Her eyes filled with tears. The venue, the date, the dress. Everything you had, I wanted. You always got everything so easily. The career, the perfect relationship. I just wanted something that was yours. The pathetic truth of it hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't some grand passion or even calculated malice. It was petty jealousy and financial desperation, wrapped in the convenience of mutual betrayal. You're both disgusting, I said quietly. Benjamin moved toward me. Zara, please. We can fix this. I'll end it with her. We can start over. I stood, backing away from his outstretched hand. There's nothing to fix. It's already over. As I reached the door, Esme called out, What are you going to do? I turned back one last time, looking at these two people I'd once loved. That depends on what happens next, but I promise you both, I'm just getting started. The door closed behind me with a soft click that felt like the period at the end of a chapter, but not the end of the story, not by a long shot. I didn't go home after the hotel confrontation. I couldn't face the apartment I'd shared with Benjamin, filled with photos and memories that now felt like elaborate props in a production I hadn't known I was starring in. Instead, I checked into a different hotel across town, turned off my phone, and slept for 14 hours straight. When I finally woke, sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains, the numbness that had carried me through the past week had evaporated. In its place was a raw, pulsing anger that demanded action. I turned on my phone to find 37 missed calls and dozens of texts. Benjamin, begging for forgiveness. Esme, alternating between apologies and threats. Patrick, worried about my silence. And one from a number I didn't recognize. We need to talk about Esme and Benjamin. Meet me at Riverside Park, noon tomorrow. Archer. My heart stuttered. Archer knew. But how? I hadn't contacted him. I showered and dressed in yesterday's clothes, my mind racing. Should I meet him? What if it was a trap set by Esme? But as I checked out of the hotel, curiosity won over caution. I texted back a simple, "I'll be there." The rest of the day passed in a blur of practical matters. I went to the apartment while Benjamin was at work, packed essential clothes and documents, and left my engagement ring on the kitchen counter with a note. "It's over. Don't contact me again." Patrick insisted I stay with him until I found a new place. "You shouldn't be alone right now," he said as he helped carry my bags into his spare room. "I'm fine," I lied. "No, you're not." He set down a suitcase. "And that's okay. No one would be fine after what you've been through." That night, as we sat on his balcony sharing takeout and wine, I told him about Archer's text. "You can't go alone," Patrick insisted. "What if he's angry? What if he blames you somehow? For what? I'm the victim here." "People aren't rational when they're hurt." He refilled my glass. "I'm coming with you." "Fine, but stay at a distance. I need to hear what he has to say." The next day dawned clear and warm. Riverside Park bustled with weekend activity, joggers, families, couples walking hand in hand. Patrick positioned himself on a bench within eyesight, but far enough away to give me privacy. Archer arrived precisely at noon, looking nothing like I expected. Instead of anger or devastation, his face showed only weary resignation. "Zara," he extended his hand formally. "Thank you for coming." We sat on a bench overlooking the river. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "How did you find out?" I finally asked. "I've known for months." He stared at the water. "About the affair, at least. Not about you knowing." I turned to face him fully. "You knew, and you're still marrying her. That's what I wanted to talk to you about." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Esme told me everything after you left the hotel. She's terrified you'll expose them both." "Shouldn't I? Don't you deserve to know who you're really marrying?" "I already know who she is." His voice held no bitterness, only a strange acceptance. "The question is what we do now." "We?" "Esme isn't just cheating on me, Zara. She's stealing from my family's company." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "She's been funneling money to Benjamin for months. Small amounts at first, then larger sums as they got bolder, nearly $200,000 in total." I struggled to process this. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need your help." Archer leaned closer. "I can't go to the police without implicating my family's business in a scandal, but I can't let them get away with it either." "So what do you want from me?" "Evidence. Anything you have that proves their relationship, the money transfers, all of it. I'm building a case to confront them both." I studied his face, looking for deception. "Why should I trust you? For all I know, you're working with them to find out what I know." He laughed humorlessly. "If I were on their side, I wouldn't be here offering you an alliance. I'd be threatening you into silence." He had a point. "What's your plan?" I asked cautiously. The wedding, it's the perfect opportunity. His eyes gleamed with a determination I recognized, the same cold purpose I'd felt growing inside me. 200 guests, including my family, her family, colleagues, friends, everyone who matters to both of them. You want to publicly humiliate her. I want justice. He pulled out his phone, showing me a banking app. And I want the money back. Benjamin's gambling debts aren't my problem. I hesitated. Working with Archer meant escalating everything, moving from private confrontation to public exposure. Was I ready for that? I need time to think, I said. Don't take too long. He stood. The wedding's in 3 weeks. As he walked away, Patrick joined me on the bench. Well, what did he want? I explained Archer's revelation and proposal. Patrick listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly troubled. This is getting serious, Zara. Theft, fraud, these are crimes, not just betrayals. I know. If you help Archer expose them at the wedding, there's no going back. Your relationship with Esme, with Benjamin, it'll be nuclear winter. Those relationships are already dead. I watched a family feeding ducks by the river's edge, their ordinary happiness suddenly precious in its simplicity. They killed them. But this kind of public revenge, Patrick shook his head, it changes you, trust me. Something in his voice made me look at him sharply. You sound like you're speaking from experience. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. My college girlfriend cheated with my roommate. I exposed them both at graduation, in front of everyone. What happened? I got my revenge. They were humiliated. His eyes met mine, and I've regretted it ever since. Not because they didn't deserve it, but because carrying that much anger changed who I was. His words echoed Delilah's warning. Was I becoming someone I wouldn't recognize? Someone defined by vengeance rather than the values I'd always held? My phone buzzed with a text from Archer. I need your answer by tomorrow. I stared at the message, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Working with Archer meant choosing a path of maximum destruction. Walking away meant letting Benjamin and Esme escape the consequences of their actions. I need to see Benjamin, I said suddenly. One more time. Why? Because before I decide anything, I need to look him in the eye and hear him admit what he's done. No excuses, no lies, just the truth. Patrick nodded slowly. And if he won't give you that? I stood, my decision crystallizing. Then I call Archer. Benjamin agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. I arrived early, choosing a table in the corner where we wouldn't be overheard. My hands trembled slightly as I arranged and rearranged the sugar packets, a nervous habit from childhood. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. 3 days without contact, and he looked like he'd aged years. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, clothes wrinkled. A small, vindictive part of me was pleased to see him suffering. Zara. He slid into the chair across from me. Thank you for meeting me. I said nothing, just watched him fidget under my gaze. I've been trying to call you, he continued. I was worried. No, you were worried about what I might do with what I know. I kept my voice low, controlled. There's a difference. He reached for my hand. I pulled away. I made a terrible mistake, he said. The worst mistake of my life. But I love you, Zara. What Esme and I had, it wasn't real. It was just convenient, I supplied. Profitable. His eyes widened slightly. What do you mean? I know about the money, Benjamin. The $200,000 you took from Archer's company. The color drained from his face. How did you... Does it matter? I know. I leaned forward. What I don't know is why. Why her? Why throw away everything we had? For a moment, I thought he might actually tell me the truth. His shoulders sagged, and something like genuine remorse flickered across his face. The gambling debts were worse than I told you, he admitted. Much worse. I was desperate, and Esme, she offered a solution. In exchange for what? He looked away. She was jealous of you, always has been. Your career, your confidence, the way people respect you. She wanted to take something that was yours. So you let her. The calm in my voice surprised even me. You let her use you to hurt me. It wasn't like that at first. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. It was just about the money. But then she started talking about the wedding, about how she wanted everything you had planned, the venue, the date. And you gave it to her. The final piece clicked into place. You called the venue and cancelled our reservation so she could take it. His silence was confirmation enough. I want to fix this, he said finally. Tell me how to fix this. I studied him. This man I'd planned to spend my life with, now revealed as a stranger. Had I ever really known him, or had I been in love with a carefully constructed facade? There's nothing to fix, I said, but there is something you can do. Anything. Confess, to Archer, to your family, to everyone. Return the money. Face the consequences. He paled. Zara, I can't. If this gets out, I could go to jail. That's not my problem. Please. His voice cracked. I'll end things with Esme. I'll give back whatever money I still have. We can start over, just you and me. The desperation in his eyes might once have moved me. Now it only confirmed what I needed to know. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done, only sorry he'd been caught. I'm meeting Archer tomorrow, I said, standing. I'm giving him everything I have. The texts, the hotel records, the bank statements I found in your desk. What happens after that is between you and him. Benjamin grabbed my wrist. You can't do this. Let go of me. My voice was steel. Zara, please, I'm begging you. You should have begged before you betrayed me. I pulled free of his grip. Goodbye, Benjamin. I walked out without looking back, my decision made. The next morning, I met Archer at his office, a sleek high-rise overlooking the river. He listened silently as I laid out everything I knew, everything I had discovered. So you're in? He asked when I finished. I'm in. But on one condition. I met his gaze steadily. No criminal charges, public humiliation, financial restitution. Yes, but I don't want either of them in jail. He considered this. Why do you care what happens to them? I don't, but I care what happens to me. I thought of Patrick's warning, of Delilah's concern. I won't let their betrayal turn me into someone I don't recognize. Archer nodded slowly. Fair enough. So, what's the plan? For the next 2 weeks, we prepared meticulously. I gathered evidence while Archer made arrangements for the wedding day. We met regularly, our unlikely alliance forged in shared betrayal and a mutual desire for justice. The night before the wedding, doubt crept in. I sat on Patrick's balcony, staring at the city lights, wondering if I was making a mistake. Second thoughts. Patrick joined me, offering a glass of wine. Just wondering if this is really who I want to be. I accepted the glass. The person who ruins a wedding. They ruined your wedding first, he pointed out, and your relationship, and stole your money. Not my money, Archer's. Same difference. They're thieves and liars who hurt you deliberately. He sat beside me. But if you want to walk away, I'll support that too. I considered it, the simple relief of letting go, of moving on without the burden of revenge. But then I remembered Benjamin's face in the coffee shop, not sorry for his betrayal, only sorry he'd been caught. I remembered Esme's casual cruelty. Everything you had, I wanted. No, I said finally. I need to see this through. The wedding day dawned bright and clear. Rosewood Gardens looked exactly as I'd imagined it would for my own ceremony. White chairs arranged on the manicured lawn, floral arches framing the altar, champagne stations gleaming in the sunlight. I wore a simple blue dress, nothing that would draw attention. Archer had arranged for me to be seated near the front on the groom's side. As I took my place, I caught Esme's eye from where she waited inside the garden house. Her face went slack with shock, then hardened with determination. She disappeared inside, presumably to warn Benjamin, who would be with the groomsmen. Too late. The ceremony began. Archer stood at the altar, handsome in his tuxedo, betraying no hint of what was to come. The bridesmaids processed, then the flower girl. The music changed, and Esme appeared on her father's arm, radiant in a gown that looked suspiciously like the one I'd designed for myself. As she reached Archer, he took her hands in his, smiling down at her with convincing tenderness. The officiant began the ceremony. If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. Archer squeezed Esme's hands, his smile never faltering. Actually, he said, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering, I have something to say. And with that, the reckoning began. A collective gasp rippled through the guests as Archer released Esme's hands. I've recently discovered something about my bride, he continued, his voice steady. Something I think our friends and family should know before we proceed. Esme's face drained of color. Archer, please. Esme has been having an affair with Benjamin Foster. He gestured toward the groomsmen, where Benjamin stood frozen in horror. My best man, my friend. Murmurs swept through the crowd. I sat perfectly still, my heart hammering against my ribs. But that's not all, Archer continued. Together, they've stolen nearly $200,000 from my family's company. Money that funded this wedding. Money that paid for the dress you're wearing. Esme's father stood. What is the meaning of this? I have proof. Archer nodded to his brother, who distributed manila envelopes to key family members. Bank statements, hotel receipts, text messages. Chaos erupted. Esme's mother began to cry. Benjamin tried to slip away but was blocked by Archer's cousins. Esme stood paralyzed at the altar, her perfect day disintegrating around her. Archer, she finally managed, her voice breaking, we can talk about this privately, please, like you talked privately with Benjamin, in hotel rooms I paid for. His composure cracked slightly. While you were sleeping with him, you were stealing from me. While you were planning our wedding, you were laughing at me behind my back. It wasn't like that, she grabbed his arm. Benjamin manipulated me. He needed the money for gambling debts. I was trying to help him. All eyes turned to Benjamin, who looked like he might be sick. Is this true? Archer demanded. Before Benjamin could answer, I stood. The movement drew everyone's attention, including Esme's. Her eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed in fury. You, she hissed. You did this. I walked slowly toward the altar, aware of every eye on me. No, Esme, you did this. You and Benjamin. Who is this woman? Esme's father demanded. I'm Benjamin's fiancé, I said. Or I was, until I discovered he was sleeping with the bride. Another wave of gasps and whispers. Benjamin finally found his voice. Zara, don't do this. Do what? Tell the truth. I turned to face the assembled guests. Benjamin and Esme didn't just have an affair. They systematically destroyed my life while planning theirs. They stole my wedding venue, my date, even elements of my dress design. I looked directly at Esme. You said you wanted everything I had. Well, now you have nothing, just like you planned for me. You bitch, she spat. You're just jealous because Benjamin chose me over you. He didn't choose you, I said quietly. He used you, for money, for sex, for an ego boost, just like you used him to hurt me. Benjamin stepped forward. That's not true. Esme and I. Save it. Archer's voice cut through the chaos. The wedding is off. I want both of you off my family's property in 5 minutes, or I'm calling the police. Security guards appeared at the garden entrances. Esme looked wildly around, searching for sympathy, finding none. You'll regret this, she said to Archer. All of you will regret this. She gathered her skirts and fled down the aisle, mascara streaking her perfect makeup. Benjamin hesitated, looking at me one last time. I did love you, he said. In my way. Your way wasn't good enough. I turned my back on him, listening to his footsteps fade as he followed Esme out of the garden. The aftermath was surprisingly orderly. Archer apologized to the guests, offering them reception food and drinks despite the cancelled ceremony. Many stayed, turning the non-wedding into an impromptu party celebrating Archer's narrow escape. I found him by the champagne fountain, looking dazed but relieved. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what? Helping ruin your wedding?" "For helping me avoid a marriage based on lies." He clinked his glass against mine. "I'd say we both dodged bullets today. I suppose we did." I watched the bubbles rise in my champagne. "Do you regret it? The public confrontation?" He considered this. "No. It was messy but necessary. The truth needed to come out." He studied me. "What about you? Any regrets?" I thought about Benjamin's face as he walked away, about Esme's tearful exit. I had imagined this moment for weeks. Their humiliation, my vindication. The reality was both more and less satisfying than I'd anticipated. "I don't regret exposing them," I said finally. "But I'm not sure it fixed anything. I still lost my relationship, my best friend, my wedding." "You lost things that were already broken," Archer corrected. "You just didn't know it yet." His words settled over me like a revelation. He was right. Nothing I truly valued had been lost today, only illusions I'd been clinging to. As the impromptu party continued around us, Patrick found me by the koi pond, away from the crowd. "You okay?" he asked. "Getting there." I slipped off my shoes, letting my feet dangle in the cool water. It wasn't what I expected. Revenge rarely is. He sat beside me. "What now?" "Now?" I considered the question. For weeks, my every thought had been consumed by exposing Benjamin and Esme. I hadn't planned beyond this moment. "I don't know." "That's okay too." He bumped my shoulder with his. "You don't have to have it all figured out." As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the gardens, Delilah appeared with a plate of hors d'oeuvres. "Thought you might be hungry," she said, joining us. "Quite a show you put on." "Not my finest moment," I admitted. "I don't know about that." She selected a stuffed mushroom. "Standing up for yourself, refusing to be a victim, seems pretty fine to me." I could have just walked away. "You could have," she agreed. "But sometimes the harder path is the right one." We sat in companionable silence, watching the party from a distance. Archer caught my eye across the lawn and raised his glass in a silent toast. I nodded in acknowledgement, feeling an unexpected kinship with this man I barely knew. "Ready to go?" Patrick asked eventually. "Almost." I stood, brushing off my dress. "There's one more thing I need to do." I walked to the center of the garden, to the spot where I had once imagined saying my vows. The spot where, just hours ago, Esme had seen her carefully constructed facade crumble. I slipped off the promise ring Benjamin had given me years ago, the one I'd continued wearing even after finding my engagement ring on the kitchen counter. I held it for a moment, feeling its weight one last time, then dropped it into the koi pond. The ripples spread outward, distorting my reflection before settling into clarity again. I looked different somehow, stronger, clearer. I turned away from the water and walked toward Patrick and Delilah, toward whatever came next. Not healed, not yet, but no longer broken by betrayal. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. Benjamin and Esme had taken many things from me, but they hadn't taken the one thing that mattered most, my ability to stand in my truth, even when it hurt. Some bridges needed to burn so you could see the horizon beyond them.
Hi there, I'm Marceline. You know, most people worry about what their family will say at their funeral. But me? I watched my own mother read my obituary. While I was still breathing, they declared me dead, held a church service, erased me from every photo, every memory. And I wasn't even invited. They sold my things, took my inheritance, rewrote the story like I never existed. And the worst part? They thought I'd never come back, but I did. It was an ordinary Thursday evening when my phone buzzed. I was halfway through folding laundry in my tiny apartment on the south side of St. Louis, the local news humming quietly from the TV. I almost ignored the notification. It was from Facebook Messenger, and let's be honest, who still uses that anymore? But then I saw the name, Shayla Boone. I hadn't heard that name in over a decade. My old high school friend, the girl who once snuck me out to late-night bonfire parties behind the soccer field. My thumb hovered over the message. Curiosity won. Her message was short. Hey, is this really you? Thought you were dead? I blinked at the screen, assuming she'd mixed me up with someone else. But then I scrolled down and saw the screenshot she'd attached. A Facebook post. Black and white photo of me at 16. Below it in bold letters. In loving memory of Marceline Cross, our beloved daughter, sister, friend, 1992-2013. My stomach dropped. I stared at the post like it was a bad joke, a mistake, somebody messing around. But the more I looked, the colder I felt. Under the photo was a comment. We miss her every day, she left us too soon. It was posted by Celine Cross, my sister. No, this couldn't be real. I shot a message back to Shayla. What the hell is this? I'm alive. Who told you I was dead? Her reply came instantly. Your mom. They held a memorial service, a big one at church. I thought you died in a car crash. My hands froze. I read her message twice, then 3 times. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. It was one thing to be disowned, cut out, forgotten. It was another to be buried alive. Before I could even process what I'd seen, another message popped up. Here, you need to see this. A YouTube link. I hesitated for a second, then tapped play. The video opened with the Cross Family Church logo, the soft hum of organ music in the background. The camera panned across the crowded pews, familiar faces I hadn't seen in years. Neighbors, cousins, my parents' friends, all dressed in black. Then it landed on her, my mother, Verna Cross. She stood at the pulpit, composed, graceful as ever. Her voice echoed through the sanctuary. Today, we gather to remember Marceline, a troubled soul who lost her way. She's gone now, but we pray she's finally found peace. I couldn't breathe. They didn't just cut me off. They declared me dead, publicly, in front of God and everyone. The video panned to the audience, faces I grew up around. People who used to hand me casseroles at church picnics, who smiled and nodded every Sunday. None of them questioned the lie. None of them looked surprised. I let the video play to the end. My mother's crocodile tears, my father's stiff posture in the front row, Celine's blank stare. The slideshow at the end, a montage of childhood photos of me. My kindergarten graduation, my awkward teenage smile, the last photo of me at 16. They all sat there and mourned a funeral that wasn't real. When the video ended, the silence in my apartment felt suffocating. I sat there, staring at the dark screen, feeling something rise inside me, like grief mixed with rage, grief twisted into something sharp. I wasn't supposed to see this. They'd buried me without a body, without a question, without a fight. For 12 years, I'd worked my way up from nothing, scrubbing toilets in diners, waiting tables on weekends, putting myself through school. I built a life in the shadows because I thought I had no choice. But now I knew. They hadn't just left me behind. They'd erased me. And the worst part? No one, not one single person, had said a damn thing. The next hour blurred. I sat there replaying the video, reading the comments under that Facebook post. Cousins I hadn't seen in years writing things like, "She was always so troubled. We tried to help her. Her poor mother, such a loss." I felt sick. I reached for my phone and typed out a message to Shayla. Why didn't anyone ask? Why didn't anyone look for me? Her reply was gut-punch simple. They said you didn't want to be found. That's when it hit me. They hadn't just killed me in words. They'd made me invisible, and they thought they could get away with it. I wiped my face, stood up from the couch, and walked to the window. The city lights of St. Louis glowed back at me, unaware, uncaring. But I was no longer the girl they buried 12 years ago. If they wanted me dead, fine. I'd come back as their worst nightmare. I stood by the window long after the city lights blurred into one another, long after the funeral video stopped playing in my head. The silence in my apartment pressed on my chest like a weight. I thought maybe if I stayed still enough, I wouldn't feel it, that sickening emptiness, the ache of being wiped away. But stillness doesn't save you. It only gives the ghosts room to scream louder. Eventually, I walked back to the couch and grabbed my laptop. The glow of the screen felt too bright in the dark, but I didn't turn on the lamp. I didn't want soft light tonight. I wanted the hard, cold kind that showed everything. My fingers moved on autopilot. I opened the private folder I'd kept hidden all these years, tucked away photos, old emails, scraps of memories I couldn't quite delete even when I wanted to. There I was, smiling at my college dorm move-in day. Another picture of me and Shayla at a Halloween party, covered in glitter, and one I hadn't looked at in years. Me at 19, hair tied up messily, sitting on the porch steps of the house I used to call home. That house, the place where everything ended. I closed my laptop, leaned back, and let myself fall into the memory. It was the night of my 20th birthday, spring of 2012. I had come home late, thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd saved me a slice of cake. Maybe I'd get a smile from my father, or one of those half hugs from Celine. Foolish hope. Instead, I walked in to find my mother waiting in the living room, arms crossed, lips tight. She didn't even let me speak. "You've made your choice, Marceline," she said, cold as marble. "And you're no longer one of us." Before I could ask what she meant, she shoved a black trash bag into my arms. Inside, my clothes, haphazardly thrown together, and a one-way bus ticket to Kansas City. "That boy isn't your future. We are. But you've chosen rebellion, so go." My father stood in the hallway behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the floor. Celine leaned against the staircase, smirking like she was watching a soap opera. I remember the weight in my stomach heavier than the bag in my hands. "You're really going to throw me out?" I asked, voice cracking. My mother didn't blink. "You made this bed. Now lie in it." Outside, the night was cold for April. I sat at the curb for a while, the bus ticket crumpled in my hand, wondering if I should tear it up. But where would I go? No one ever comes looking for the daughter they've buried alive. That night stayed with me longer than any scar. But I thought that was the end of it, being discarded, pushed out. Turns out it wasn't enough for them to exile me. They had to erase me. I leaned forward now, opening my laptop again. On impulse, I searched my own name. Nothing. No old photos, no tagged memories, no birthday wishes from years past. My high school graduation post? Gone. Photos from our family trip to Yellowstone? Vanished. It was as if every digital trace of me had been scrubbed clean. I opened Celine's profile out of spite, scrolling through her curated picture-perfect life. Posts about family holidays, her big promotion at the bank, the annual church fundraiser. Every caption dripping with sugar. Grateful for my beautiful family, wouldn't be who I am without them. As if I'd never existed. Scrolling further, I found something that punched me right in the gut. A post from 2014. A photo of my childhood bedroom, empty and stripped bare, captioned, "Cleaning out the past to make room for the future." I recognized the rug rolled up in the corner, the bookshelf my grandfather built, the one I used to line with borrowed library books. Gone. That's when I remembered. A conversation I'd overheard on the night they kicked me out. Celine's voice, muffled through the thin walls. "She brought this on herself. She's not family anymore." At the time, I thought it was just anger. Now I knew it was something worse, something calculated. They hadn't just thrown me out. They'd erased me. The digital graveyard was complete. No trace of me anywhere. Every memory, every photo, every post, deleted. A part of me wanted to slam the laptop shut and pretend I hadn't seen it. But the other part, the part they couldn't kill, kept me scrolling, digging, screenshotting everything I could find. I wasn't going to disappear quietly. As dawn began to creep through the blinds, I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a while, listening to the city waking up outside my window. Then I whispered to myself, like a promise, "You wanted me erased, but I'm still here, and I'm coming back." The sun had already begun to rise by the time I stood up from the couch. My apartment was bathed in that soft, hesitant light that only comes at dawn, when the city hasn't fully woken up, and everything feels fragile. I hadn't slept. Couldn't. My head buzzed like a radio stuck between stations, thoughts jumping from one to another without landing anywhere solid. The funeral video, the empty digital footprint, Celine's cold words, it all circled endlessly. I moved to the kitchen, made a cup of bitter black coffee, and sat back down at my desk. My laptop stared back at me, waiting. Part of me wanted to shut it, Pretend this nightmare had ended with the sunrise. But I knew better. They wanted me erased. I was about to show them how badly they'd failed. Without thinking, I opened an old folder buried deep in my files, documents I hadn't touched in years. Bills, contracts, loan applications, rejection letters. A trail of my life, back when I was building it from scratch. That's when I saw it. A loan application from 2018. Denied. The reason stared back at me like a slap in the face. Applicant listed as deceased. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a mistake. This was paperwork murder. I scrolled back through other letters, emails, old tax documents. 3 times over the years, I'd been flagged as deceased in records. It had made no sense back then. I assumed clerical error, shrugged it off because I was too busy surviving to question it. But now, knowing what I knew, it wasn't a glitch. It was intentional. I grabbed my coat without thinking, left the coffee half-finished on the table. The early morning chill of St. Louis hit my face as I stepped outside. The streets were still quiet, city buses just starting their routes. By the time I reached City Hall, the building had only just opened. A clerk at the records desk greeted me with a bored smile, asking how she could help. "I need a copy of a death certificate," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "A family member?" I swallowed. "Mine." The clerk blinked, but didn't ask questions. She typed my name into the system, fingers clicking quickly against the keyboard. A minute later, she frowned, then glanced up at me. "It says here you passed away in 2013. I felt like the floor cracked beneath me. She printed the document without hesitation and slid it across the counter. There it was, my name, my birth date, my supposed date of death, signed and filed by none other than Verna Cross. My mother, the cause of death? Accidental, vehicular. The lie, neat and official, stamped with the city seal. I walked out of City Hall holding a copy of my own death certificate, the paper burning against my fingers. It wasn't until I reached the sidewalk that the second punch hit me. The inheritance. Back when my grandmother passed, she'd left something for me, a small trust fund. Nothing massive, but enough to start fresh. I tried to claim it when I was 21, but the lawyer had told me there was no mention of me in the records. That everything had gone to Verna and Celine. I hadn't thought much of it back then. I assumed my grandmother changed her will, or maybe my mother made sure I was written out. But now, I marched straight to the law office I hadn't set foot in for over a decade. Same gray walls, same stiff chairs, same receptionist with the same tired smile. The lawyer, Mr. Aldridge, barely remembered me at first, but when I told him my name and asked to revisit my grandmother's case, something shifted behind his eyes. "You know," he said, adjusting his glasses, "I always thought it was odd. You were supposed to be listed, but your mother provided proof of your death when the estate was processed." He pulled up the old files. There it was again, my death certificate, used to legally remove me from the will. They hadn't just declared me dead. They'd stolen everything I was supposed to inherit, all because to them, I was better off erased. I left the law office with copies of the documents tucked under my arm, my mind moving faster than my feet as I walked back to my apartment. By the time I stepped inside, the city was fully awake, the morning sun glaring through my blinds like it wanted to expose everything I'd uncovered. I laid the documents on my dining table, my death certificate, the loan rejection, the inheritance file, evidence, proof of what they'd done. They'd killed me on paper, but I was still here. And I was done letting them write the story. I pulled out my phone, opened the airline app, and booked a one-way ticket back to St. Louis. It was time to face the family who buried me alive. The plane touched down in St. Louis just before noon, the wheels rattling hard against the runway, as if even the ground was reluctant to welcome me back. As I walked through the airport terminal, I kept my head low, sunglasses hiding the storm brewing behind my eyes. I hadn't set foot in this city in over a decade, but somehow everything felt exactly the same, and nothing did. I rented a car at the curbside, the clerk barely glancing at me when I handed over my ID. I drove through the streets I once knew like the back of my hand, the skyline of the city looming in the distance, sharp against the clear blue sky. It wasn't until I turned onto Kingsbury Avenue that my hands started trembling on the wheel. There it was, the old church. the place where they'd held my funeral. The Cross family church hadn't changed. Same red brick exterior, same white steeple scraping the sky. For a moment, I slowed the car, staring at the front steps where I used to sit after Sunday school, waiting for my father to finish small talk with the congregation. Now those steps were stained with a memory I couldn't scrub clean. I didn't stop. I kept driving, past the familiar corner store, past the park where I used to sneak cigarettes behind the bleachers, until finally, inevitably, I turned onto my childhood street. The Cross family house sat quietly at the end of the block. Same manicured lawn, same white shutters, the same rose bushes my mother pruned every Saturday morning. Except now, it felt like a tomb. I slowed but didn't park, just enough to let my gaze linger on the front door, the one I used to walk through every day without realizing how quickly it could close behind me forever. As I drove past, memories pushed their way to the surface like unwelcome guests. It was late at night, the night Verna threw me out. I'd been standing in the living room, holding that ridiculous black trash bag. My father across from me, Harlan Cross, the man who used to tuck me in with bedtime stories about brave girls who fought monsters. That night, he couldn't even meet my eyes. "Harlan!" my mother barked at him, her voice sharp, cutting. "Say something to your daughter." He didn't. He stood there like a statue, staring at the floor, shoulders hunched, as if he'd shrink into nothing if he stayed still enough. I remember the taste of copper in my mouth, the panic rising like bile. "Dad?" I whispered, hoping, begging for him to step in, stop this madness. He shook his head. "Your mother's right," he said quietly, voice hollow. "You've made your choice." That choice cost me everything. The memory faded as I pulled into the parking lot of a small motel off Delmar Boulevard. I didn't want to stay anywhere too close to their world. The motel clerk barely looked up when I paid for 2 nights in cash. Once in my room, I dropped my bag on the bed and collapsed into the chair by the window, staring blankly at the afternoon traffic crawling past. The past wouldn't leave me alone, so I stopped trying to outrun it. I reached for my old phone, the one I hadn't used in years, but still kept tucked in a drawer for reasons I couldn't explain. I powered it up, the battery barely clinging to life. I sifted through old voicemails, old texts, deleted folders. That's when I found them. A folder I didn't remember saving, messages from my father, unsent drafts, never delivered. "I don't know if you'll ever read this. Your mother, she's not making this easy. I wanted to call you on your birthday." I should have stopped her. Each message felt like a knife carving into old scars. He'd tried, but not enough. In my email drafts, there were letters, awkward, clumsy apologies typed out but never sent. Letters that stopped short of taking responsibility. "Your mother thinks I shouldn't talk to you. She says it's for the best. I hope you're safe, wherever you are." I closed the phone and let out a long breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. He wasn't innocent, but maybe he wasn't heartless either. That night, back in the motel, I sat at the small desk by the window, pen in hand, notebook open. I'd stopped writing in journals years ago, but tonight, the words needed somewhere to land. "Silence is a choice," I wrote, and he chose to let me die. I closed the notebook gently, like it contained something fragile. My phone buzzed against the table, pulling me out of my thoughts. A message from an unknown number. "Family anniversary party tomorrow. Everyone will be there." My heart stilled. It wasn't an invitation. It was a warning. Morning sunlight crept stubbornly through the thin curtains of my motel room, casting long stripes across the rumpled sheets. I hadn't slept well. My mind kept looping that message. "Family anniversary party tomorrow. Everyone will be there." They called it a party. To me, it sounded like a funeral I hadn't agreed to. I reached for my phone the moment I opened my eyes. Notifications blinked in the corner of the screen. One stood out, a forwarded Facebook event from an unknown account. I tapped it open. 40th wedding anniversary, Verna and Harlan Cross. All family welcome. The banner photo was a picture of my parents in front of the church, arms around each other, smiling like they hadn't buried a daughter in lies. Below it, dozens of comments scrolled endlessly. "Congratulations to the most faithful couple we know. You've built a beautiful family." Celine is such a blessing. I searched the guest list. My name wasn't there. Of course it wasn't. Beneath the RSVP section, there was a pinned comment from Verna herself. So grateful for our only daughter, Celine, who's carried our family's legacy with grace and strength. The words hit like a slap. They didn't just delete me, they handed my entire existence to her. I scrolled deeper, fingers trembling with quiet rage. Celine's profile picture smiled back at me, polished and perfect, standing beside my parents like she was the sole product of their love, their pride. Further down, another post from Verna. Not every family member stays on the right path, but we thank God every day for the one who never strayed. Beneath it, an outpouring of sympathy and praise. I tossed the phone onto the bed like it burned. Hours passed without me realizing. I drifted between pacing the room and sitting still, heart pounding with a kind of rage I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. By late afternoon, my phone vibrated again. A message from Milo, my cousin, one of the few who'd always kept his distance from family drama. You need to see this. Attached was a photo of a folded piece of paper, typed and neatly formatted. Celine's speech. I zoomed in. Today we celebrate not just our parents' enduring love, but the family they built. A family marked by resilience, faith, and loyalty. I stand before you as the daughter who stayed, the one who carried our name when others chose to leave. My throat tightened as I read. Every word was a dagger. She wasn't just erasing me behind closed doors anymore. She was standing in front of a crowd, wearing my absence like a badge of honor. I messaged Milo back. How'd you get this? His reply was short. Aunt Delphine sent it to me. She thinks you should know. I sat at the edge of the bed, the weight of it all pressing down like a boulder on my chest. They were about to celebrate a lie. Smile for photos, raise champagne glasses, tell the world how perfect they were, all while dancing on my grave. Enough. I opened the notebook I'd started last night, the one where I'd written about my father's silence. I flipped to a new page and scribbled, You bury me once. Shame on you. You bury me twice. Watch what happens next. Then I grabbed my phone again and messaged Milo. Tell Aunt Delphine something for me. He replied instantly. What? Tell them this. If they keep burying me, I'll bring the whole graveyard with me. The sun dipped lower behind the motel blinds. I stood, moved to the table where I'd laid out my documents. The death certificate, the inheritance paperwork, screenshots of social media posts, copies of the speech Milo had sent me. I organized them neatly in a folder. If they wanted to put on a show tomorrow, I was going to give them an ending no one would forget. As night settled over St. Louis, I sat by the mirror in the motel room, tying my hair back. I looked at my reflection, not the girl they'd called troubled and rebellious, not the ghost they declared dead. A woman who had clawed her way back from nothing, who knew the truth. Tomorrow, I whispered to myself, my gaze steady. I show them who's really dead inside. By noon the next day, the city felt like it was holding its breath. The sun hung high over St. Louis, its spring warmth brushing over the streets, as if nothing monumental was about to happen. I stood by the window of my motel room, folder in hand, dressed in black, not mourning, preparing. I'd spent the morning moving slowly, deliberately, ironing the creases from my dress, securing my documents in order, brushing my hair back neat and sharp, every move a declaration. I was alive, and I was done hiding. At precisely 1:30, I drove toward the Cross family home. The streets grew narrower, more familiar with every turn. And there, at the end of Kingsbury Avenue, stood the house that had once been my entire world. It looked almost staged, balloons tied to the front gate, a banner stretched across the driveway. 40 years of love, Verna and Harlan Cross. Cars lined the curb. People milled about on the front lawn, holding champagne flutes, laughing in their Sunday best. From inside, I could hear music drifting out, light and cheerful. The smell of catered food and fresh-cut roses mixed with the sound of polite conversation. A perfect party, a perfect lie. I parked 2 houses down, stepped out, folder tucked firmly under my arm. As I walked toward the front door, no one noticed me at first. They were too busy smiling, too busy congratulating themselves. I stopped by the gate, watching them. Verna floated from guest to guest like a queen at court, flawless in her navy blue dress, silver necklace resting perfectly at her collarbone. Harlan lingered in the corner, drink in hand, shoulders hunched like a man trying to disappear. And Celine, radiant in a pale yellow dress, stood front and center, beaming. The family I'd been cut from, the story they rewrote without me. I stood quietly for another moment, breathing in the scene. Then I pushed the gate open and walked in. No one noticed at first. The laughter didn't stop, but as I moved toward the front steps, heads began to turn. And when Verna raised her glass, the room fell into focus. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice smooth as honey. 40 years of marriage is no small thing, and today we don't just celebrate love, we celebrate family. She glanced toward Celine, who smiled sweetly, knowingly. Some of us lost people along the way, people who lost their way. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. We honor them too, and we give thanks for the daughter who never strayed. A ripple of polite nods swept through the crowd, and then, as if rehearsed, Verna unfolded a piece of paper from the pocket of her dress. I recognized it immediately. The same obituary she'd read at my funeral a decade ago. In memory of our beloved daughter Marceline Cross, lost too soon but never forgotten. Her voice cracked at the right places, eyes shimmered with manufactured grief. The performance was flawless, until I stepped through the front door. The sound of the latch clicking echoed louder than her speech. Aunt Ruth dropped her champagne glass. It shattered against the floor. A hush rippled through the crowd like an electric current. Verna froze mid-sentence, the obituary slipping slightly in her hands. Celine's smile faltered, her eyes locking onto mine. I took one step forward, then another, the folder clutched tightly in my hand. "Sorry to interrupt," I said calmly, my voice carrying across the room. "I wasn't sure if I needed an invitation to my own funeral." The silence was deafening. All eyes turned to Verna, then back to me. Some faces registered confusion, others horror. Verna's lips parted, but no words came out. I walked forward, slow and steady, until I stood in the center of the room. "You declared me dead," I said, voice steady. "You held a service. You read my obituary at a church filled with people who clapped and nodded and prayed." I paused, letting the weight of it settle. "But here's the problem," I continued, pulling open the folder. "You can't bury someone who's still breathing." One by one, I laid the documents on the cake table. First, the death certificate, stamped and signed by Verna's own hand. Then, the inheritance file, showing how I'd been erased to funnel money elsewhere. Next, the rejection letters marked deceased applicant. Finally, screenshots of social media posts, the obituary, the lies that had been repeated over and over. "You told everyone I was gone," I said, turning to face them all. "But I've been living, working, building a life while you were mourning a corpse you invented." The room remained frozen. No one moved. Verna's hand trembled against her glass. Celine stood rigid, mouth tight, gaze darting to the documents as if she could will them to disappear. Then, from the back of the room, a voice broke the silence. "You're not alone anymore." I turned. Aunt Delphine stood near the hallway, her eyes locked on mine. Beside her, Milo stepped forward too. A fracture began to split the room, clear and visible. Some faces turned toward Verna in doubt. Others looked away in shame. The ghosts weren't staying buried. The family was about to split wide open. The silence that followed Aunt Delphine's words didn't last long. It cracked like thin glass under the weight of too many whispers, gasps rippling through the crowd. I could feel the room shifting, eyes darting between me and Verna, mouths half open in disbelief. Someone near the cake table muttered, "Is that really her?" Another voice, lower, more hesitant. "She's supposed to be dead." The murmur grew louder, rolling across the room like a wave ready to crash. Verna tightened her grip on her champagne glass, her lips pressed into a line so thin it almost disappeared. Celine's stare hadn't left me. She looked like she'd swallowed glass, rigid, sharp, ready to cut. Aunt Delphine stepped forward, her heels clicking against the polished floor, the sound slicing through the tension. "I've stayed quiet long enough," she said, voice steady but strained. It's true. Marceline's alive. She's been alive all these years, and we've all been part of the lie. A ripple of movement near the back of the room, some guests shaking their heads, others exchanging frantic glances. Verna's eyes snapped toward Delphine. "Sit down," she hissed, sharp enough to slice skin. But Delphine didn't flinch. "I won't." Next to her, Milo straightened, his gaze locked on Celine. "You did this," he said, voice louder now. "You helped them erase her. You sat back while they buried your own sister and called it righteousness." Celine's jaw clenched. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Milo shot back. "I was there the night they cleaned out her room. You acted like she never existed." The crowd shifted again, this time with a noticeable divide. Some family members moved closer to Delphine and Milo. Others drew tighter around Verna and Celine, like soldiers readying for battle. Verna regained her poise like it was a second skin. She raised her chin, her voice slicing through the noise. "You want to talk about family?" she snapped. "Family doesn't betray their blood. Family doesn't abandon everything we stood for and come crawling back just to destroy what's left." I met her gaze without blinking. "You destroyed it yourself the day you decided I was easier to bury than to love?" The room erupted, voices overlapping, people arguing in corners, some already heading for the door. Years of polite smiles and Sunday prayers unraveling in real time. Celine stepped forward, her eyes burning. "You're only here to ruin everything. You always were the problem, Marceline." My fingers tightened around the folder in my hand. "No, Celine. The problem is that you believed your lies so long you thought no one would ever question them." I glanced at the crowd, some avoiding my gaze, others nodding quietly. "You erased me," I continued, voice cutting cleanly through the noise. "But I rebuilt myself. Without you, without any of this." I laid the folder down on the table, next to the half-eaten anniversary cake. "I didn't come here for your approval. I came here to bury your lies." A few family members clapped, hesitant but real. Others shook their heads, muttering beneath their breath. Verna's face remained carved from stone. Celine's eyes shimmered, not with tears but rage. Then Verna leaned toward Celine, her words barely audible but sharp enough to slice. "If she wants a war," Verna whispered, her gaze still pinned on me, "we'll give her one." And just like that, I knew. The real battle hadn't started yet. The next morning felt too quiet. I sat at Aunt Delphine's kitchen table, a chipped coffee mug warming my hands, the air thick with tension. The curtains were half drawn, letting in the soft light of a cloudy St. Louis morning. Outside, birds chirped like the world hadn't cracked open the night before. Delphine stood at the stove, stirring oatmeal she probably had no intention of eating. Milo sat across from me, scrolling through his phone but not really reading. None of us spoke at first. There wasn't much left to say. Finally, Delphine broke the silence. "They're not going to let it end like this." I nodded. "I know." Milo glanced up. "You ready?" I took a deep breath. "More than ready." The phone on the counter buzzed. Delphine checked it and turned the screen toward me. A message from one of our cousins. "Family meeting today, 3 p.m. at the house. Mom says everyone's expected." A meeting. Of course they'd call a meeting. You can't sweep a funeral crasher under the rug without a proper counsel. I set my coffee mug down. Let's give them the funeral they deserve. The hours leading up to it crawled by, but somehow, by the time I stood again in front of the Cross family home that afternoon, it felt like I'd blinked and arrived. No balloons this time, no champagne, just a driveway full of parked cars and heavy silence hanging over the lawn. Inside, the living room was packed. Verna sat stiffly in her armchair like a queen in exile. Celine stood beside her, arms crossed, jaw tight. Harlan occupied the farthest corner of the room, eyes trained on the floor. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone was there, waiting. The door clicked shut behind me. No one smiled. Verna's voice sliced through the room first. "Let's get this over with." I stayed standing. I wasn't here to sit politely. "You want to talk?" I said, voice even. "Fine, let's talk." Delphine took a seat near the fireplace. Milo hovered by the doorway. Celine spoke next, her tone brittle. "You've humiliated this family enough. I met her gaze without blinking. No, Celine, you humiliated yourselves the moment you decided to erase me. The conversation spiraled quickly after that. Verna pointed a trembling hand at me. You always wanted to tear this family apart. You've done it now. You tore it apart the day you signed my death certificate, I shot back, pulling out a copy and laying it on the coffee table like a weapon. You decided it was easier to kill me on paper than face who I really was. The room stirred. I reached into my folder, laying out document after document. The inheritance paperwork rerouted to Celine's account, the loan rejections marked deceased, the social media posts, the obituary read in church like scripture. You didn't just cut me out, I said. You rewrote the entire story. All eyes shifted to Verna. She remained silent. Then from the corner, Harlan's voice broke the tension. I knew. The words fell like a brick in the middle of the room. Verna whipped her head toward him. Harlan, don't! He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on me. I knew what your mother did. I knew about the papers, the lies. His voice cracked, raw. And I did nothing. He finally looked up, voice breaking. I was a coward. No one spoke. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat, forced my voice steady. You let me die because it was easier. Harlan nodded once, a broken man. I took a step forward, letting my eyes sweep across the room. Enough of this. I didn't come back to be forgiven. I came back to finish this. I reached for the last document in my folder, a formal legal complaint, stamped and signed. I've filed charges, I said clearly, voice ringing through the room. Fraud, falsifying government records, inheritance theft. Gasps erupted. Someone whispered, she's serious. I wasn't finished. And tomorrow, I added, a journalist from the Post will be publishing the whole story, every lie, every document. You wanted to bury me? Now the whole world will know how you did it. Verna's face drained of color. Celine's lips parted, no sound coming out. Around the room, family members shifted uncomfortably, some standing, some turning away. Verna sank back into her chair like the air had been knocked out of her. Celine, face flushed, spun on her heel and stormed toward the door. Before she reached it, I spoke one last time. This isn't the funeral you planned, she stopped, but it's the one you deserve. 1 week later, the streets of St. Louis felt quieter. I sat on the edge of my new apartment's balcony, coffee in hand, staring out at the skyline I'd once thought I'd never see again. The war was over, but the echoes of it still hummed under my skin. The fallout had been swift. Verna lost everything that mattered to her. Not the money, that was untouched by the law, but the thing she valued more, the image. The church revoked her leadership roles. Her friends stopped calling. The community that had once hung on her every word now crossed the street to avoid her. Celine didn't fare much better. She took a leave from her job a day after the family meeting. The whispers in her workplace became unavoidable. The Cross family name used to mean something here. Now it meant betrayal. Harlan moved out of the house 2 days after I left. No fanfare, no goodbye. He left behind only a message forwarded to me by Delphine. I failed you. There were no victors, just survivors. I took a slow breath, letting the morning air cool my lungs, and thought back to that family meeting, the day everything cracked open. It hadn't felt like winning, but it felt like the truth. That afternoon, I'd walked out of the Cross home and gone straight to the courthouse. The charges I filed against Verna hadn't earned her jail time. Forgery and fraud, yes, but the law has a funny way of treating family crimes. She paid a hefty fine, was ordered to complete 200 hours of community service. But the real punishment wasn't legal. It was the empty pews at church on Sunday, the friends who stopped answering her calls, the names she couldn't clean. And me? I kept my promise. I told the whole world what they did. A month after the meeting, I launched the first episode of my podcast, The Girl They Buried Alive. I spoke into the mic in my small living room, voice steady but raw. I didn't just tell my story, I laid it bare. Every document, every lie, every silence. The downloads started slowly, then the messages came. Strangers from Ohio, California, Texas, women, men, people who'd been erased by their own families, each of them carrying their own scars, their own ghosts. Some nights I sat up reading their emails until the sun came up. I wasn't the only one. One evening, Milo came by with a bottle of wine, and Delphine trailing behind him, holding a pie she'd baked herself. We sat around my tiny kitchen table. No speeches, no apologies, just laughter and long silences that didn't feel heavy anymore. At one point, Milo raised his glass and said quietly, "To the ones who stayed." Delphine added, "And the ones who came back." We ate, we laughed, we let the wounds breathe. Later that night, I stood by my window, looking out at the city lights. It wasn't the family I was born into, but it was the family I chose, and somehow that felt better. As dawn began to color the sky, I stepped out onto the balcony, letting the cool breeze brush against my skin. They'd tried to bury me, but I'd learned something about things buried deep. They don't stay quiet. They grow back stronger. I smiled faintly and whispered to myself, not for them, but for me. They buried me once, but I grew back. Before I close this chapter for good, I want to leave you with something. If there's one thing I've learned from this journey, it's this. Family doesn't always mean protection. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who will bury you first, whether in silence, in shame, or in lies. But your worth is not defined by who abandons you. You are not the names they call you, the stories they rewrite, or the doors they slam shut behind you. You are who you decide to become when no one is clapping for you. I stood back up because I realized something powerful. No one can write your obituary but you. And sometimes, the only way to heal is to stand in the ashes of what they tried to burn and say, "I'm still here." So let me ask you, have you ever felt like someone tried to erase you? Have you ever been told you wouldn't make it? And yet, here you are, breathing, standing tall. If this story touched something in you, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment with a 1 inch if you've ever had to fight your way back when the world wrote you off, or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story traveled. And if you didn't like this story, I want to hear that too. Tell me why. Tell me your story. Because here, your voice matters. And if you want more real, raw, unforgettable stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Hi there, I'm Tina, and if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, you're not alone. My sister called me a used single mom at her birthday party I paid for. But that wasn't the worst part. For years, I stayed quiet while my mother and sister tore me down, smiled to my face, then mocked me behind my back. And just when I thought I could take no more, my 8-year-old son stood up and said something that made the entire room freeze. What could an 8-year-old say that stopped everyone in their tracks? I stared at the glow of my laptop screen as the clock on my kitchen wall ticked past midnight. My small apartment in Austin was quiet, except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the clicking of my fingers on the keyboard. Bills were stacked neatly to my left, a growing tower of overdue notices, school fees, and utilities I hadn't gotten around to yet. Numbers. That's what my life had come down to. Countless spreadsheets, late-night calculations, juggling every penny to make sure my son Noah had everything he needed. No safety net, no support system, just me, the responsible one. Outside, the September air had cooled, but the weight on my chest hadn't. My fingers paused on the keyboard as I glanced toward the small clock on my phone. Past midnight. Again. A soft knock pulled me back to the present. Noah peeked his head around the doorframe, hair messy from sleep, voice small. "Mom, do we really have to go to Aunt Maribel's birthday tomorrow?" I closed the laptop slowly and rubbed my tired eyes. "Yeah, buddy, we have to." He looked at me like he knew I wasn't telling the whole truth, then nodded and shuffled back to bed. After tucking him in, I sat back down, but I couldn't focus. My mind wandered back to last week, the conversation that started all this. Vivian, my mother, had called me casually while I was in the middle of a client meeting. "Your sister's planning her big birthday party, honey. She thought it'd be nice if you could help out. You know, cover the costs." I should have said no. I wanted to say no. But Vivian's next words were the same ones she always used to guilt me into obedience. "You wouldn't want to ruin your sister's special night, would you? You're always so reliable. Reliable. That's all I was to her. A wallet with a pulse. By the time I realized how much this party would cost me, the caterer had already been booked, the decorations chosen. And then, as if to twist the knife, Maribel posted on her Instagram 2 days ago. Throwing the best birthday bash all by myself, #independent queen. I laughed bitterly when I saw it. Not a single word about me footing the bill, not a single acknowledgement. Typical. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't just this party. It was every family event, every holiday, every so-called special occasion where I was expected to show up, pay up, and shut up. My sister always got the credit. I always got the receipts. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how tired I was, not just physically, but in my soul. The silence I'd kept for so many years felt like a noose tightening around my throat. But I swallowed it down, again, for Noah. He deserved peace. He didn't need to see his mother fighting another war inside her own family. I got up from my chair, stretched my aching back, and made my way to his room. He was already asleep, one arm curled around his favorite stuffed bear. I leaned down, brushing a kiss across his forehead. As I walked back to the kitchen, I grabbed my phone to check if I missed any messages. And there it was. Vivian's latest reminder, like a slap across the face. Don't forget, be on time tomorrow. And remember, not to embarrass Maribel. I stared at the text, my stomach tightening. How much longer was I supposed to bite my tongue? How much longer could I swallow my pride before it swallowed me whole? My mother's words echoed in my mind all night. I barely slept, staring at the ceiling while the weight of that message pressed against my chest like a stone. Morning came too quickly. By 9 a.m., I was already dressed and driving across Austin toward Vivian's house, the house I grew up in, but never felt at home. The sun was sharp and bright, the kind of day most people would call beautiful. I didn't notice. My stomach was tight the entire drive. When I pulled into her driveway, I took a deep breath, trying to prepare myself. I knew exactly what kind of day this would be. It was never just party preparations. It was an exercise in swallowing pride. As soon as I stepped inside, the scent of fresh flowers and vanilla candles filled the air. Vivian liked everything to look effortless, even though someone else, usually me, was always the one making it happen. She glanced up from her tablet, not even bothering to greet me properly. "You're late," she said flatly, although I wasn't. Before I could answer, she gave me a once-over, her eyes lingering too long. "Couldn't you have done something with your hair? You don't want people thinking you've let yourself go?" The comment stung, but I kept my face neutral. In the living room, Maribel stood in front of the mirror, rehearsing her speech like she was accepting an Oscar. She barely acknowledged me as I passed. "Mom said the caterer's late," Maribel said, flipping her hair without looking at me. "Make yourself useful." That was how it always went. My existence was a convenience, nothing more. I spent the next hour confirming guest lists, arranging table settings, smoothing out last-minute chaos, while they talked over me like I wasn't there. As I was double-checking the seating chart, I overheard Vivian talking to one of the decorators. "No, Tina's friends won't be attending. This is a classy event. We don't need her kind of people." Her kind of people. I paused, my hand tightening around the guest list. I waited until the decorator walked away before asking quietly, "You didn't invite Angela or Karen." Vivian barely glanced up. "This isn't one of your backyard barbecues, dear." Maribel chimed in from across the room, her tone coated in sugar but sharp underneath. "You know how awkward it'd be if your boring friends showed up? This is a sophisticated party." I swallowed hard, heat rushing up my neck. I wasn't surprised, but it still cut. It was one thing to exclude me. It was another to erase the people who actually cared about me. For the rest of the afternoon, I worked like a ghost, present but unseen. Every time I tried to speak, Vivian would redirect the conversation. Maribel would change the subject. I existed only to make sure the party would be perfect. By the time I left their house, the sky had already turned a soft pink. The drive home felt longer than usual. Noah was waiting at the window when I pulled in. At dinner, he noticed my quiet mood, because he always did. "Mom," he said, poking at his spaghetti, "why don't Grandma and Aunt Maribel ever say thank you to you?" I smiled weakly, brushing his hair back from his forehead. Some people only see what they want to see, sweetheart. But that doesn't mean we aren't valuable. Later that night, after Noah fell asleep, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling again. The house was silent, but my mind wasn't. One thought kept circling, refusing to let me rest. If I vanished tomorrow, would anyone in my family even notice? The next morning, I drove to my mother's house with the same heaviness pressing on my chest. I'd barely slept, my mind restless with the same question that haunted me the night before. If I disappeared, would they even notice? The streets of Austin were still quiet when I pulled up. Early sunlight spilled over the rooftops, casting long shadows across the pavement. I sat in the car for a few seconds, staring at the grand front door of the house I grew up in, a place that never really felt like home. When I finally walked in, I was greeted by the same cold efficiency as always. Vivian barely looked up from arranging silverware. "You're early," she said without warmth, as if that were a crime. Maribel's laughter rang out from the dining room, where she was adjusting the centerpiece of the long table. She looked flawless, as always. Her perfectly styled hair, her immaculate red dress, the picture of the perfect daughter. I knew my role. I stayed out of the way, smoothing tablecloths, checking details, making sure everything was flawless. Guests began arriving by late morning. Vivian greeted them like royalty, kissing cheeks and smiling wide. "This is my darling Maribel," she beamed, drawing every guest toward my sister, like she was the star of the show. When I was introduced, if at all, it was with a brief, distracted wave. "This is my other daughter, Tina." Other, like an afterthought. I moved through the crowd quietly, making sure nothing fell apart. That was my job, wasn't it? Keep everything running while remaining invisible. It wasn't until noon that I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a notification from Vivian's social media. "Proud of my beautiful family. So blessed." I tapped the post out of habit, even though I knew better. There it was, Vivian smiling beside Maribel in her red dress, the two of them glowing like a magazine cover. No sign of me. No sign of Noah. They'd literally cropped us out of the photo. A bitter taste filled my mouth, but I swallowed it, just like I always did. At brunch, Vivian kept the performance going. "Maribel is such a success," she gushed to anyone who would listen. "She's got the career, the connections, she's the whole package." When someone asked about me, Vivian waved it off. "Oh, Tina, she works with numbers, very practical." I didn't bother correcting her. I'd long since learned that whatever I did would never be enough. As I refilled the orange juice pitcher, memories I thought I'd buried started creeping back in. Birthday parties where Maribel blew out the candles while I cleaned up the mess. Holidays where I cooked dinner while they laughed in the living room. One memory burned more than the others: my college graduation. I'd worked 2 jobs to put myself through school, stayed up nights studying until I fell asleep on my books. Vivian came to the ceremony, but left early. She said she couldn't stay because Maribel had a beauty pageant that same afternoon. That day, standing alone in my cap and gown, I understood exactly where I stood in this family. It was never about me. It never would be. As I folded the napkins at one of the tables, I heard Maribel's voice behind me. "You should really smile more tonight, Tina. People already think you're bitter." Her words slid under my skin like a splinter. I didn't look at her. I didn't respond. But inside, something sharp twisted and lodged itself deeper. Her words weren't new, but that day, they cut deeper than ever. By the time Maribel walked away, I felt hollowed out, like she'd scooped out something inside me and left nothing but the shell. The afternoon sun spilled lazily across the backyard as I finished folding napkins and double-checking the place cards one last time. Guests would start arriving in a few hours, but the house was already buzzing like a hive. The caterers were setting up trays, florists adjusting the arrangements. Vivian walked through the chaos like a queen surveying her court, her smile bright for everyone but me. I stayed in the background, making sure no detail was out of place. If anything went wrong, I knew who'd get blamed. At one point, I caught Noah sitting quietly near the sliding door, his small hands fiddling with a napkin, eyes darting between me and the laughter filling the room. He wasn't used to this much tension. He could feel it even if he didn't understand it. I walked over and knelt down. "You okay, kiddo?" He nodded, but didn't look convinced. "It's really noisy here, and everyone's talking over you." My chest tightened. I wanted to tell him it wasn't always like this, but it was. Before I could say anything more, Vivian called my name sharply from across the room. "Tina, a moment, please." I stood and followed her into the hallway, away from the noise. She closed the door behind us, her smile evaporating the second no one else could see. "Listen carefully," she began, her voice low but sharp enough to slice through me. "Tonight isn't about you. It's about Maribel. I don't want you mentioning your job or Noah. No one needs to hear about your sacrifices." My throat tightened, but I said nothing. Vivian kept going, smoothing invisible wrinkles on her sleeve like she was tidying the conversation itself. "You've always had this unfortunate habit of making people uncomfortable. Don't do that tonight. Just smile, nod, and let Maribel shine." There it was, the same old message neatly packaged in fake concern. I swallowed, forcing myself to meet her eyes. "You're ashamed of me." She scoffed, waving her hand like I'd said something ridiculous. "Don't be dramatic, Tina, but let's be honest, you don't exactly fit the image." That was the moment I felt something shift inside me. I straightened my shoulders, my voice quieter but firmer. "I've been quiet long enough. You might not like who I become when I stop swallowing my words." Vivian's smile returned, thin and cold like glass. "You always were too sensitive." She walked away before I could say anything else. I stayed there for a moment, letting the silence settle over me like a weight. Then I went back to the living room where Noah was waiting. He looked up when I sat beside him, his small hand reaching for mine without saying a word. "You okay, Mom?" he asked softly. I forced a smile and squeezed his fingers gently. "I'm okay, and I'm going to make sure you're okay too." In that moment, something inside me hardened, not bitterness, but resolve. I wouldn't let them chip away at me anymore, not in front of my son. As the first guests began to arrive, the air in the house shifted. Laughter and chatter filled the rooms, the buzz of celebration echoing off the walls. But beneath it all, I felt something else. A quiet storm waiting to break loose. And it didn't take long before the first blow landed. The evening unfolded like a well-rehearsed play. String lights glowed softly over the backyard. The scent of roses and expensive perfume mingled in the warm Texas air. Laughter filled the space, and the sound of clinking glasses echoed beneath the music. Maribel stood at the center of it all, radiant in her red dress, a glass of champagne in hand. She laughed easily, moving from guest to guest like she was running for office. I stayed near the bar, Noah by my side, my eyes scanning the crowd without really seeing anyone. Vivian floated past me once, stopping just long enough to give me a thin smile. "Try to keep up tonight, sweetheart. Don't look so serious." I nodded tightly and went back to watching from the sidelines. It was safer there. Dinner began an hour later, guests taking their places at the long table. Vivian made her rounds, greeting each person like she was the hostess of the century. When she finally sat down, the conversation at her end of the table grew louder. I was seated a few spots away, not close enough to be included, but close enough to hear everything. It happened casually, like a joke tossed across a room. One of Vivian's friends leaned in and asked, "So what does Tina do these days?" Vivian's voice cut through the noise, loud enough for everyone nearby to catch. "Oh, nothing fancy. She's just a numbers girl. Sits behind a desk, crunching spreadsheets. But at least she's good at paying bills." The table chuckled politely, like it was a harmless joke. I sat perfectly still, my fingers curling around the edge of my plate. Numbers girl. That wasn't new. I'd heard versions of it my whole life, but tonight it felt heavier, sharper, like she wanted everyone to know I'd never be more than the woman who wrote checks and stayed quiet. I inhaled slowly, choosing my words carefully. "Actually," I said, my voice calm but clear enough to carry, "I run my own financial consulting firm, and without me, this entire party wouldn't be happening." The table went quiet for a beat too long. Vivian let out a light laugh, waving her hand like she was swatting away a fly. "Oh, honey, no need to make this about you. We all know Maribel is the reason we're celebrating." I met her eyes and smiled tightly. I'm not making it about me. I'm just tired of pretending I'm invisible. For a moment, no one said anything. Then the conversation resumed, shifting away from me like I'd never spoken. Later, as the party wound down toward dessert, I felt a small tug at my sleeve. Noah was looking up at me, his brows drawn together in that worried way he had when he sensed something was wrong. "Mom," he whispered, "why does Grandma talk about you like you're not good enough?" His question landed heavier than anything Vivian had said. I bent down, brushing his hair back gently. "Some people only see what they want to see, sweetheart, but the truth?" I leaned closer. "The truth always finds a way." Noah nodded solemnly, but I could tell he didn't fully understand yet. Neither did I. I didn't know then, but the truth was about to tear through the facade faster than I imagined. It started with a toast I wished I'd never heard. By the time dessert plates were cleared away and glasses refilled, the atmosphere had shifted. The polite small talk had turned louder, fueled by wine and showmanship. I could feel the energy around me tightening, like the air before a storm. Maribel stood at the center of the room, her red dress catching the light as she clinked her glass for attention. "Everyone, may I have your attention for just a moment?" The guests quieted, turning toward her expectantly. I stayed in the back, Noah at my side, my hand resting protectively on his shoulder. My heart thudded against my ribs, as if it already knew what was coming. Maribel smiled that rehearsed, perfect smile. "First, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. It means the world to me to celebrate with all of you." She paused for effect, letting the room soften before delivering her punch. "And, of course," she continued sweetly, "a special thanks to my sister Tina, the strongest single mom I know. She sacrificed her youth and career to raise a child alone. But hey, at least she's good at paying for parties like this." The laughter that followed wasn't loud. It was scattered, uncomfortable. Some chuckles, some eyes darting away. My stomach dropped as if the ground had vanished beneath me. She hadn't even tried to hide the insult. It was delivered with a smile, wrapped in faux affection, but sharp enough to draw blood. I felt the heat crawl up my neck, my fingers curling involuntarily at my sides. I glanced down at Noah, who was looking up at me wide-eyed, his small face confused and hurt. Something inside me snapped, not all at once, but like a thin thread finally breaking after being pulled too tight for too long. When the laughter died down, I stepped forward, my voice calm, cutting through the noise like a blade. "Thank you, Maribel," I said, lifting my glass. "It's good to know my money is appreciated, even if my presence isn't." The room went still. Eyes turned toward me, some surprised, some awkward. Maribel's smile wavered for a moment, but she recovered quickly, letting out a light laugh as if I'd made a joke. "Don't be silly, Tina. You're family." I met her gaze evenly. "Funny. I never quite feel like it." A few guests glanced at each other, shifting in their seats. The music resumed, chatter picked up again, but something under the surface had shifted. I could feel it. Later, as I stepped out onto the patio to catch my breath, I overheard Maribel talking to one of her friends near the bar, her voice sweet but soaked in sarcasm. "Well," she said lightly, swirling her drink, "at least I got my sister to pay for my party. That's what big sisters are for, right? Bank accounts and built-in babysitters?" Her friend laughed politely, but when I glanced toward the corner of the room, I noticed two other guests had clearly overheard. Their expressions weren't amused. They looked away quickly, pretending they hadn't heard anything. I stood frozen for a moment, the words clanging around in my head like bells I couldn't unhear. Noah came up beside me, slipping his hand into mine without saying a word. I looked down at him, the weight of everything pressing on my chest. The facade was cracking. I caught the glance of one guest across the room, a woman I didn't even know well. She looked at me differently now, not with pity, but with recognition, like she'd finally seen the truth peeking out behind the curtain. And then, as if on cue, my mother took the microphone and drove the knife even deeper. Her words didn't just bruise me, they set something inside me on fire. I didn't have time to catch my breath before the microphone crackled again and my mother's voice took over the room. Vivian smiled at the crowd as if nothing awkward had happened, as if she hadn't just let her youngest daughter humiliate me in front of everyone. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice dripping with charm. "It's wonderful to see so many lovely faces here to celebrate my beautiful Maribel." She glanced around the room, then added sweetly, "And of course, let's not forget my other daughter, Tina. She's not as glamorous as Maribel, but she's dependable, like an old car that keeps running no matter how many miles she's got on her." A few guests let out uncomfortable chuckles, unsure whether to laugh or cringe. The words hit me square in the chest, like a slap delivered with a smile. My heart thudded painfully in my ears. I felt Noah stiffen beside me, his small fingers tightening around mine. Vivian wasn't finished. She may not have a fancy life or a husband, but she's always been good at showing up when we need her. That's what matters, right? I could see the cracks in the guests' expressions. Eyes flicked toward me, some full of pity, others with discomfort. I swallowed the lump in my throat and took a step forward, my heels clicking on the tile louder than the music. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You know, Mom," I said evenly, "I may not have your approval, but I'll be damned if I let you step on me one more time." The room went silent. The tension in the air was sharp enough to slice through. Maribel rolled her eyes and muttered something under her breath, but I kept my eyes locked on my mother. Vivian's smile tightened, her lips thinning like pressed paper. "Don't make a scene, Tina. This is Maribel's night." "Trust me," I replied, my voice low but clear. "The scene was already made the moment you decided I was nothing but a punchline." Before she could respond, I felt Noah's hand slip from mine. I glanced down and realized he was walking toward the hallway, his head hanging low. Alarm bells went off in my head. I excused myself quietly and followed him, but I wasn't fast enough. Behind the curtain near the back exit, I caught sight of Vivian bending down, her hand gripping Noah's shoulder. Her voice was soft but sharp, meant only for him. "You better behave tonight, little man," she hissed. "If you embarrass your mother anymore, everyone will see what a burden you really are." Noah didn't say a word. His face fell, his small body shrinking into itself. Before I could react, one of the waiters rounded the corner and caught the end of it. His eyes met mine, his expression a mixture of shock and something else. Anger, maybe. He nodded slightly, like he'd heard enough. Vivian straightened up quickly when she saw me, smoothing her dress like nothing had happened. "Run along now, Noah," she said sweetly, her voice flipping back to its public charm. "We wouldn't want to ruin your aunt's party." Noah slipped past her without looking up, straight into my arms. The waiter passed by me as I held my son, quietly murmuring, "Ma'am, I heard everything. I thought you should know." Something inside me broke clean in half. All this time I'd let them belittle me, mock me. But now, they were turning their cruelty on my son. And that, I couldn't forgive. At that moment, I realized, if they couldn't hurt me anymore, they'd go after my child. And I was done letting that happen. So when Noah stood up in front of everyone, I didn't stop him. It happened so fast, I almost missed it. I was still holding him close, trying to ground myself after hearing what Vivian had said to him, when Noah gently pulled away. Before I realized where he was going, he walked straight to the microphone at the front of the room. The chatter in the hall quieted as he reached up on his tiptoes, adjusting the mic to his small height. A few guests chuckled awkwardly, expecting a child's joke or birthday wishes. But then he spoke. "My name is Noah," he began, his voice small but steady, carrying through the stunned silence. "And I want to say something about my mom." My breath caught in my throat. The guests turned toward him, wine glasses paused midair, conversations frozen. "My mom isn't broken. She's not used," he said, glancing around the room with eyes far too serious for an 8-year-old. "She's the strongest person I know." A murmur rippled across the crowd. Noah's fingers fidgeted nervously, but he kept going. "She works every day so I can go to school, so I can have a good life. She paid for this party. She helped decorate. She made sure everything was perfect. Just like she always does." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes as he looked down, his voice softening. "And no one here ever says thank you." A hush fell over the room so deep I could hear the music outside, faint and distant. Noah stepped away from the mic, his eyes searching for me in the crowd. When he found me, I saw it, the tiny crack in his brave facade. I rushed forward and pulled him into my arms, holding him close. Before I could even think of what to do next, a voice rang out from the crowd. "You know," an older man said, rising from one of the tables near the front, "I've known Vivian and Maribel for years, and I've watched them treat Tina like this at every single family event." Heads turned, whispers swirled. Another woman stood up, her voice tight. "It's true. I used to think Tina just kept to herself, but now I see why." A third voice joined, then a fourth. One by one, people began speaking up. Guests who had attended birthday parties, holidays, family dinners. People who had seen the little slights, the subtle digs, and had never said a word until now. Vivian's smile faltered. Maribel's face drained of color. The weight of years of cruelty was now shifting in the room, pressing back toward them. Then, like a dying animal lashing out one last time, Maribel snapped. "Oh, please," she scoffed, stepping toward the front. "Of course she's playing the victim now. That's all she's ever done. She's good at pretending to suffer." Her voice cracked at the edges, desperate. This time no one laughed. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I walked back to the microphone, Noah's hand in mine. I knelt beside him so we stood together and spoke calmly. "You don't get to decide my worth anymore." My voice didn't shake. It rang clear, cutting through the tension like a knife. I turned to the guests who had spoken up. "Thank you for finally seeing me." Then, looking straight at Vivian and Maribel, I said the words I'd carried in my chest for years. "This is the last time you'll ever have power over me or my son." And with that, I took Noah's hand and walked away, leaving behind the noise, the whispers, and the people who never truly saw me. But walking away was only the beginning. 3 months had passed since that night, since my son's voice sliced through the noise and shattered everything I thought I had to endure. The air felt different now. That morning, as the autumn breeze rolled gently through downtown Austin, I stood outside a small brick building on 5th Street, staring at the freshly painted sign above the glass door. Weiler Financial Consulting. My name, my work, my rules. No more answering cold texts from Vivian, no more hollow invitations from Maribel disguised as family gestures, no more pretending. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The office was small but clean, bright and mine. The shelves were half empty, the furniture modest, but every inch of it belonged to me, built from the ground up without anyone else's permission. Noah ran past me, his backpack bouncing on his shoulder. "Mom, I put your new pens on your desk, and I organized the files." I smiled, watching him arrange the books with a seriousness only an 8-year-old could muster. 3 months ago, I walked away from that party with nothing but my son's hand in mine. Now, I was standing inside the life I should have built years ago. The phone in my pocket buzzed, but I didn't need to check it. I already knew it wasn't from Vivian or Maribel. They hadn't contacted me since the night everything fell apart. Word had spread quickly after the party. Guests whispered behind their backs. Business partners quietly distanced themselves. Invitations dried up. Maribel's carefully curated public image crumbled almost overnight. She lost 2 freelance contracts. Her Instagram followers dropped like flies. Friends who once admired her extravagant lifestyle stopped returning her calls. Vivian, too, withdrew from the spotlight she loved so much. Without her parties and her family image to parade around, she faded into the background, reduced to whispers about, "What happened at that birthday?" I didn't take joy in it, not exactly, but I couldn't deny the quiet satisfaction of knowing they no longer controlled the narrative. For years I had believed I was the problem, the bitter sister, the too serious daughter, the used single mom. Now I knew better. But knowing didn't erase the scars. Some nights, when the house grew too quiet, I'd still hear Vivian's voice in the back of my mind. "Don't embarrass us." I'd lie awake wondering how many versions of myself I'd twisted into just to fit their mold, and how much I'd lost trying. Forgiveness wasn't something I was ready for. Maybe one day, but not today. Today, I had a business to run, and a son who had shown me what real courage looked like. "Mom!" Noah called from behind my desk, holding up a folded piece of paper. "I made you something." He ran over, handing me a crayon drawing of our office logo, surrounded by a sun and 2 stick figures, him and me, holding hands. I knelt down and pulled him into a hug, pressing my cheek against his messy hair. "You know something, sweetheart?" I whispered. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Noah grinned and hugged me back. "And you're the best boss ever." A soft knock at the door pulled me from the moment. Elliot stood there, 2 coffees in hand, a tentative smile on his face. "Thought you could use a caffeine refill on your first day," he said. I smiled back. Not everyone who stood at that party stayed silent. Some people had seen and stayed. I took the coffee and nodded my thanks. As the 3 of us sat on the worn leather couch, Noah chattering away about his latest science project, I let myself breathe. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like a footnote in my own story. I looked around at my little office, my son's drawing taped proudly to the wall, and the people beside me. And I realized something. Sometimes, family isn't who you're born to. It's who stands beside you when everyone else turns away. And sometimes, the voice that saves you is smaller than you'd ever expect. Before I end this story, I want to leave you with something I wish I'd heard years ago. For most of my life, I stayed quiet because I thought keeping the peace meant keeping the family. I thought if I bit my tongue and took the hits, it would earn me love or acceptance. But here's what I learned. Your worth isn't measured by who claps when you're silent. It's measured by how you stand when you finally speak. Family isn't just blood. It's who respects you, who lets you grow beyond the version they created in their mind. Sometimes it takes the smallest voice, like my son's, to remind you that you deserve to be heard. So let me ask you, have you ever stayed quiet to avoid conflict, even when it hurt you? Have you let someone's words define you for too long? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear it. And tell me where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. If you want more real stories about people finding their voice in the middle of the storm, hit subscribe and turn on notifications.